The next two topics in 6.5 are much more topics that would apply to a true practical statistician, somebody who's doing work out in the field. First is our significance level, right? Our significance level with some arbitrary value that is set, and that will tell us basically what our cutoff for something being unusual or rare is. And as we learned in class on Thursday, it's also the probability of making a type 1 error. So we're setting the acceptable amount of type 1 error. Now, most journals, what the past has been is that you needed a p-value of 0.05 to be considered for publication. But think about what this really means. Suppose you calculate a test statistic and you find the p-value is 0.0511 and your alpha level is 0.05. What would your decision be? So 0.0511 is just barely greater than 0.05. So our statistical decision would have to be to fail to reject the null, which would mean, from a practical standpoint, we could not publish in most journals because they will require that 0.05 cutoff for that significance level. So this is a very sad p-value, but how is that really different from this p-value? I mean, how much different is this probability versus this probability? Where here we get to say, oh, we're less than 0.05, we reject the null, right? Very, very big difference in terms of outcomes. One sentence was saying, hey, there is enough evidence. The other sentence was saying there's not, but not a huge difference in our probabilities. So most of the time, if you were actually doing a publication or something, you publish your p-value, with the exception of that one journal that no longer allows p-values. You publish your p-value and your test statistic, and people can then make their own conclusions about whether or not they think you have enough evidence. You don't just write that one sentence and say there is enough evidence or there isn't. And one thing that can make our sentences that we use in our class a little stronger is maybe putting down at a significance level of this value, we have enough evidence to say whether, because one thing we could do with this particular case is we could just use another common alpha level or significance level of 0.1, because then we're less and we could reject the null. Sometimes, especially in like psychology, they'll call this trend level instead of statistical significance. All right, so the last topic is an important one. Whenever we do these questions, like the one up above for the p-value, where we ended up having a p-value of 0.05, just to quickly, I know this is not even related to what's here, so you don't need to write this down. But basically, they said we were looking at the probability of people thinking they were due for a promotion of 64%, and then the p-value, the test statistic, all of it measures how far is 66% from 64%. Is it far enough that it's unusual? Is the difference great enough that it's unusual? And there's a big disconnect sometimes between statistically significant things and practically significant things. Is 66% really that different than 64%? So just because we have statistical significance doesn't mean it's practically significant, that we're going to go and make policy changes or do anything because of it. So here's a simple example from my time at SDSU. Suppose that 70% of students pass Stat 119 at SDSU, same class at SDSU. In a sample of students who took an additional recitation class for 2 hours every week, 72% of them passed. Suppose the p-value for this test is 0.006. Do a larger proportion of students in the recitation class pass 119? Yes, obviously, right? Is it statistically significant? Yes, obviously. Our p-value is super small. It is less than almost any of the possible alphas we might use. We could use one of the more strict alpha levels and we still would reject the null. We still have statistical significance. But is it practically significant? Would you, as a student, sign up and take a class for 2 extra hours every week so that the chances of you passing would go from a 70 to a 72%? No. To me, this is not at all statistically significant. Or practically significant. Sorry, I'm being slow. Not at all. And that's because the difference in those two, that 2% difference, is not enough that I'm going to do what is required to get that 2% difference. So this is not practically significant at all. If it was an 80% to a 70%, then maybe I'd be compelled. But 72% is so close that we can't really say there's a big difference.